Moving on to 4A. Before we kick off, we're going to say what we do in a lot of our previews. You know your team, your area better than us, so if we missed something, feel free to drop that in the comment section down below. Give us your thoughts, anything you thought, hey, you guys missed this or you got this wrong, please let us know because there are a lot of schools to cover. Thank goodness for things like Indiana Football Digest, John Harrell, and Max Preps. That's pretty much where I lived this past weekend, getting all the lowdown on all the teams. So, biggest storyline there for me is how real are East Central running backs Josh Ringer? How realistic is his Mr. Indiana football hopes? He's on the short list according to the Indy Star. Of the last 10 Mr. Football winners, 3 have been the running back position. We had Markel Jones from Columbus East in 2014, Charlie Spiegel from New Pal in 2019, Carson Steele from Center Grove in 2020. How Ringer stacks up against those guys? Jones had 3,500 rushing yards and 60 touchdowns. Spiegel had 3,100 rushing yards and 55 touchdowns. Then you have Ringer, who last year put up 2,368 rushing yards and 39 touchdowns. Then you had Steele having 1,659 yards and 31 touchdowns. Ringer was third in the state in rushing yards. He's the state leader as far as returnees go. He also led the state with 42 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns in the 4A state championship. So if he can put together another season where he flirts with 2,500 rushing yards and leads the state in that category as well as touchdowns en route to a title, I mean, I think he's got a really compelling chance if he has anything close to what he did last year. I think he'll be in a good position.
Yeah, the 4A, I think it has quite a bit of talent. I think that's going to be the key. I think that's going to be the biggest storyline is the level of talent that's coming out of 4A. Can they contend with the 5A and 6A on names on bigger schools? I think that's my storyline is just how this talent can take over the class 4A. Whether it's who you just talked about or Mylan Graham out of New Haven. There's just a lot. There's some good solid talent there, and I'm really interested to see how that is looked at on the grand stage as far when it comes to the Indiana Mr. Football. Yeah. Because we have seen that the Indiana Mr. Football voters are not afraid to go after to select somebody from a lower class. I mean, like usually you might think, oh, they were really good, but look at the level of competition they were playing against. They're not afraid to say, hey, this 1A linebacker who also plays wide receiver, he is the best player in the state, regardless of level. So it'll be interesting.
I mean, you've got Jack Kaiser from Pioneers. I think they were 1A. You've got Charlie Spiegel, which I talked about. He was from 5A New Pal. Last year, Drake Bowen was 2A Andrean. So, I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. Which is nice to see. It's nice to see that they're not just like, well, it's got to be a 6A guy or a 5A guy. It can be those guys that are at, some of the lower levels who just are like, hey, you know what? Yeah, our opponents may not be as tough as 6A, but at the same time, our numbers reflect that. It's not like everyone's putting out the numbers we are or close to those numbers. Like we are showing you that, hey, we are playing the lesser opponent and taking advantage of that and putting up really, gaudy stats and things like that. So, as far as toughest sectional goes, I'm looking at sectional 24. It's always we talked about the Fort Wayne schools. It's just as crazy with the Evansville schools as well. Evansville Rights, they had an undefeated season a year ago in the regular season. They were either the preseason number 2 in 4A according to Indiana Football Digest. They returned running back defensive lineman Levi Oxley, who was on the All 3C media team last year. He's back and ready to contribute on both sides of the ball again. You've got Evansville Memorial, who's ranked number 6 by Indiana Football Digest. They made it to the regional last season before losing to East Central. You've also got a pesky Boonville team that was 8-4 last year too. So you've got a lot of teams in the southern part of Indiana as well that like to beat and bang on each other, and we'll see who can maybe emerge from that sectional and if they can be a team that's contending at the end of the year.
Yeah, I agree. Sectional 24 is a bloodbath, and that's always a fun one to keep an eye on. What I love about 4A the most is that this is where we see a lot of the really good schools up in northern Indiana and southern Indiana. This is the one where you can almost leave central Indiana out of the conversation. To me, that's a lot of fun. I really do like that. I mean, there are a couple of teams in 4A that in central Indiana that get their nose in there every once in a while, but you know, anything coming from north and south is super entertaining. So yeah, but sectional 24, I mean, it's very similar to the Fort Wayne area. Those schools are going to beat up on each other, and anybody that comes out of there does have a legitimate shot to make that run to Lucas Oil Stadium. So definitely keeping an eye on that sectional as well.
Player to watch. I'm staying with East Central running back, the senior Josh Ringer. Going to Miami of Ohio, so staying in the MAC. But I kind of wish he was coming to Ball State, but it's fine. It's okay. Um, he had nearly 2,400 yards, 39 touchdowns on the ground last season, 42 total. We mentioned that. 4 games of 4 or more rushing touchdowns, including the 4A state final. He had 5 touchdowns versus Martinsville, also in the 4A state tournament. 6 touchdowns versus South Dearborn in September. That earned him 3C Media Player of the Week honors. I know that put him on our radar. He's a front runner for Mr. Football in Indiana, and he's going to be pivotal to East Central's plan of going back to back. So Josh Ringer is my player to watch. I think he can have a really outstanding season.
In 4A, the conversation should begin and end with New Haven wide receiver Mylan Graham. Mylan Graham is a 5-star recruit committed to Ohio State, chose Ohio State over offers from Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, Notre Dame, Penn State, Tennessee, Texas A&M,
They have
the
good wide
usual
receivers, right?
suspects. What?
Ohio State typically has good wide receivers, right?
Yeah. But I mean, his tape is eye popping. Last year, he caught 48 passes for over 1,100 yards and 13 touchdowns. Yes, New Haven was only 5-5 last year, and they lost in the first round of the sectionals to DeKalb. But man, this kid has what it takes to really uh, take help take New Haven to the next level this season. If he can live up to his ranking and his with the 5 stars, there's no reason he can't help New Haven be more successful this year. And honestly, if he wants to be considered even be considered for Indiana Mr. Football, he's going to have to take that next step and really help take New Haven to some more success this year than just 5-5.
Right, right. So as far as the dark horse goes and our state champion, I'm going dark horse wise. I'm gonna go with Kokomo. They finished in the top 10 in 5A according to Max Preps. 7th in the final AP poll, 6th in the coaches poll. The Wildcats earned their first sectional and regional title since 2017 last year. They lost to eventual state runner-up New Prairie in the semi-state. IFD has them at preseason number 4 in 4A, and although they'll have to break in a new signal caller in 2023, they do return all-state running back Darian Story, who ran for nearly 1,200 yards and 17 touchdowns on the offensive side, and they also get all-state defensive back Reese Beard back as well. He had 64 tackles, 8 for loss, 11 pass breakups, and 3 interceptions in 2022. So they've got a lot of talent on that Kokomo team, and I think they can go deep into that tournament as well. Of course, I mean, heck, they only lost by 1 point to New Prairie. I believe that was a 10-9 final. So, they were right there in the conversation, to get to Lucas Oil last year, and I think they have the firepower to do it again. However, I'm going to keep the trend going with my state championship picks. I'm going to go with East Central. It's so hard to ignore what the Trojans did last season and what they bring back this year. I know I've talked a lot about Josh Ringer and all of his successes and all he brings to the table. They also return quarterback Cole Burton. He had nearly 1,800 yards, 22 touchdowns a year ago. They also return All-State offensive lineman Noah Snyder, All-State linebacker Braden Rouse. Rouse last year, 83 tackles, 4.5 sacks, and a fumble recovery. The Trojans were a force last year, and with all they have coming back, I think it'll be more of the same. I think it's one of those things where like I picked. Some of my other picks were just kind of based on past history or like on a whim. With this one, it's like, man, all the talent they have coming back is just so crazy, and so I'm going with the Trojans to repeat this year.
So for me, I don't know if you can really call this one a dark horse, but I'm going my my dark horse pick is Evansville Wright. Yeah, I know. They finished number 2 last year, preseason number 2 this year. But I don't know. I feel like that like I said earlier, that Evansville sectional is going to set them up pretty nicely. You know, especially when you're returning one of your key players that's on both sides of the ball with Levi Oxley. It's hard to overlook some of those things. So yeah, Evansville Wrights is my dark horse, and I agree with. I'm going with you as well on this one. East Central, man. I mean, last year was really, they were just out of this world. Really on both sides of the ball. I mean, I'm interested to see if they can continue that success into this season and make that run again. But again, it's one of those things that with what they are returning, you have to say the state championship, the 4A state championship, is theirs until proven otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, they've just got so much coming back, and I mean, there are a lot of good teams at the top of 4A as well, but it's just so hard to ignore what East Central returns.